I'm Brian Solis, and you are watching Behind the Brand, and we're talking X.
Hey, I'm Brian Elliott. Welcome to another edition of Behind the Brand. Today I'm here with best-selling author Brian Solis talking about his new book, X. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brian. It's great to see you again.
You've written a lot of books. Talk to us about X. What's it about?
Yeah, absolutely. I've written a lot of books, which it's now number 7. X, The Experience When Business Meets Design, is sort of the culmination of all of these years of work, which have been really trying to push businesses back to customer centricity or employee centricity, basically putting people back at the center of everything. And it's been a very interesting challenge because each book has, in its own way, really tried to empower different groups within the organization to take it from the middle up, and at the same time going right to the top to see if I can inspire change from the top down. But X was a real personal journey because I realized that at the heart of this is that we could say a lot of things like people-centric, digital marketing, customer experience, all of the buzzwords that are happening right now, culture 2.0, employee engagement. But really at the heart of all of this is the experiences that people have and people share, right? That is what is driving everything. And technology is really fortifying that within everybody's lives, right? If you think about the idea of a selfie, some people could see that as a narcissistic act. Some people could see that as a human emoticon. So really what X is about is getting back to the center of people, what their aspirations are, what their challenges are, and using that as sort of inspiration to think about how would you connect with somebody in a way that's relevant to them, in a way that matters to them, so that your brand is much more than creative, that your product is much more than coolness, that your customer service is much more than just people helping you, that all of these things contribute together to a new era of business that delivers experiences in every moment of truth.
So how important is user experience?
It's everything, right? But I think it's also underappreciated and a bit misunderstood, to be honest. User experience is it's a very core discipline that's often relegated to design. So for example, user experience will run the design of the website, to make sure that certain things are where they need to be in order to drive desired engagement and outcomes. But it's also so much more that it's a discipline that allows you to know people, it allows you to study psychographics, it allows you to study shared interests and behaviors. And that is also supposed to then go back into product design, service design, process design. So you could take the elements of user experience, which is a book by a friend of mine, Jesse James Garrett, that helps you not only see the world differently, but design it differently to basically bring about desired outcomes and behaviors, right? So you take these elements of user experience, you also take elements of what IDEO calls human-centered design, which is becoming sort of the basis for design thinking. And you could take all of these human-centered perspectives and approaches to reimagine the future of business, right? Because, I like to joke around and say, my favorite quote was this one said by a customer, I love calling contact centers, or I love calling customer service, right? And the joke is no one does. And yet it's a massive factor of how people experience businesses, right? It's either marketing, which is one department, it's either sales, which is a different department, or it's customer support or loyalty, which are different departments. And none of them are connected. So if you imagine the importance of user experience, understanding people, understanding how their behavior is changing, how their preferences are changing, right? How their values are changing, and you reimagine how you would fix all of these aspects of business, you could start to disrupt yourself, which you should. Otherwise, the gift of disruption comes to you simply by being human-centered, right? And allowing that to drive innovation and change rather than assumption, presumption, politics, egos, all of the things that sort of drive business today.
So if I'm a brand, let's say I make tennis shoes or running shoes, or if I'm a car company, I make cars, I feel like I'm already thinking about the user experience. I'm thinking about, how someone sits in the seat and how ergonomic it is, and how the steering wheel feels, and the level of the dashboard, and how it fits to the human form and all that. Or if I'm a running shoe company, I'm thinking about, how the foot fits in the shoe and how I should be running properly. It's a neutral shoe. So how does user experience fit into the brand story in that sense? Because the brand may say, well, we're already doing that, Brian.
Yeah, so the book isn't just about user experience. It borrows from the discipline of user experience and human-centered design and storyboarding from Disney and a lot of other elements that I was able to piece together into what I think is a usable framework for businesses, right? So all of the things that you just mentioned is absolutely true. To what effect is the question, right? So just because I can see over my steering wheel and just because I could sit in this chair or just because I can run wearing these shoes does not necessarily make them the most optimal experiences, right?
So what does?
Experience design is something that you first have to start understanding what is an experience, right? And I think this is a word that is also misunderstood. And I studied it. This book took me 4 years to put together. And the reason is because it's all over the map, right? To 10 different people throughout the organization, different things. Here's what it is just at its very essence. It is an emotional reaction to something, right? I am going to experience this, right? And it will be expressed in some way. It's fantastic, it's meh, it's nothing, right? So the whole idea is to bring this aspiration to life. What are you trying to do? Why do you have these shoes? Is it to be comfortable? Because that's one brand. Is it to be the fastest person? That's another brand. Is it to be an innovative cross trainer? You know, that's another, and I say innovative and cross trainer like it was supposed to be something, but what I meant was go into cross training, which is I don't want to say it's a relatively new sport, but it's certainly at greatest popularity levels today, of which now is inspiring innovation in the design of shoes, which is a different type of activity, right? So those are all different elements of the experience you're going to have with the shoe. But look at Nike, right? Nike says, well, we can look at competitors, right? And that'll foster sort of inner market competitiveness, which is cool, which is how a lot of car companies do it. Everybody does it. Or they can look at technology companies, which is what Nike does. What is the future of our whole world? Textiles, usability, aspirations from an everyday lifestyle. Not everybody's going to be the next, you name your favorite athlete, but maybe in their world they're trying to do something. That leads to innovation in sort of the manufacturing techniques, the fabrics that they use, the whole idea of what a shoe could be. And so this is then played out in marketing and service and support and retail. This is part of what an experience could be, but also something simple to understand, like Disney, right? Disney's an incredible experiential company. It's an experiential brand, right? So whether it's the movies or the park or a cruise ship, everything is so meticulously thoughtful about the experience that you're going to have, what you're going to try to do, what you might be frustrated with. It's the little things in every aspect of it. Like at the park, the taller the building gets, the smaller the bricks are, to give you that perspective so that even adults feel like a child and that they're immersed in this world. That's experience design, and there's no reason why it should stop at the product. It should be, or marketing, it should be every aspect of the business. Because lastly, an experience is not just any one moment, it's every moment. So just because you like the marketing or you like the product doesn't mean anything if you have a problem with it and they completely fall down on giving you something that helps you, right? That's a total experience.
Automotive experience comes to mind when I think about that. All the flashy marketing and how romantic and amazing it is. And then you get to the dealership and it's a complete disconnect, right? It's like kind of a bait and switch. You're like, what happened to all that romance? And where are these really cool people that I saw in these flashy ads? It's the cheesy car salesman or whatever stereotype you want to think of. It's a complete disconnect. So is that what you're talking about as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if you look at Starbucks, right, they won't tell you that they compete against coffee companies. They'll tell you that they look at mobile innovation. They look at payments companies as their competitors. Yeah. You just have to make an incredible cup of coffee. You just have to have a great retail experience. But they're looking at how consumers are reacting to other markets as inspiration to what you design within, say, a Starbucks experience. So in the car world, it's absolutely a disconnect, but that disconnect exists in almost everything. Think about your cable service provider. Think about the music industry. Think about the taxi industry, right? And then everybody's surprised when they're completely disrupted. Yet disruption doesn't happen overnight. This is years in the making, from delivering bad experiences simply for the sake of profitability. So now that users and consumers are starting to become more in control because of technology, right? Because of social media, because of apps, because of mobile, because of pervasive internet, they're now empowered to take whatever action they want, and if they don't like what the options are, they'll start a company to deliver what they want. Yeah. Now, look at Tesla, right? Tesla, it's not rocket science, even though they own, Elon Musk has SpaceX, which is really rocket science, to know that in order to sell a car to a savvy consumer, we have to have a much better buying experience. So we have to build a great car, because that's how you compete. But the buying process, the service process has to equally match every aspect of what we tell you is going to happen. So you look at General Motors, and they have just launched, it's called the GCCX Group, the Global Connected Customer Experience Group. And they are now charged with rebuilding the entire General Motors experience. So from OnStar, it's been a tremendous program for them, but to deliver that OnStar experience, for example, in the dealership. And if you look at, for example, what they're trying to do with what Google is saying, which is the customer is not only connected, they're increasingly mobile. And the more mobile they are, the less attention spans they have, the higher the expectations that they have. And 90% of what Google is saying in terms of mobile customers, when they go to search, when they get to that discovery mode, which is so critical, 90% of them right now are brand agnostic. They just want the best experience. They'll give their business to whoever helps them answer their questions, gives them what they're looking for, helps them make decisions rather than flashy romantic ads, really well-done websites, essentially experiences. So now we're looking at, instead of transactional engagement, more holistic, more connected, more human-centered processes and outcomes. Yeah, social media is, I call it the great democratizer, because it has absolutely leveled every aspect of information, right? And this is affecting media companies, this is affecting brands. Essentially, social media has, through technology, made information much more, not just human-powered, but efficient. And so I used to have this saying I said all the time, that news no longer breaks, it tweets, right? So on average, there was a time where news broke on Twitter 22 minutes ahead of when a major news station might break it, simply because of the efficiency of the human network, right? So this is really important because we've always been social creatures, we've always shared information, but now it's indexed, right? So what you think and what you share is searchable, right? It's indexable. It's discoverable by somebody saying, hey, Twitterverse, I'm thinking about this. Can someone give me a recommendation? Or going to Yelp, or going to Amazon, or if you're an employee, going to Glassdoor. And this has paved the way for a new era of business where expectations of a customer has to be met not by flash or creativity or, hey, look at this viral video, but instead they want to do business with companies that are far more transparent, they're far more engaged, they're far more trustworthy, right? And those are dynamics of business that we just don't see on an average basis. We see them with the great brands, the Disneys, the Nikes, the Apples, the Legos, right? But even Lego had lost its way for a good while, where it was bleeding millions of dollars every single day, until it essentially hired anthropologists to figure out who are people, what are they really looking for, how can Lego be sort of relevant to them, and then things like social and mobile and other digital technologies activate that once you know its true purpose.
I kind of feel like now where we're at today, 2016 headed into 17, agencies have caught up and big brands have caught up. I almost kind of feel like I'm getting duped sometimes. Like I don't trust Yelp anymore, for example, right? I don't know if those are legit reviews or if it's been gamed somehow. What's your take on that?
Yeah, look, Amazon reviews, Yelp reviews, there's many brands have been absolutely called out for hiring people to go and either boost up a brand or take down a brand. And it's part of everyday business, unfortunately. I have this saying that there's two ways to inspire behavior. You can manipulate it or you can inspire it. And people are pretty smart. They do find what it is that they need to, and the lazy web will always take over. If you don't trust a review, you go out to your social networks and you ask somebody.
Yeah, you get a personal recommendation.
Absolutely, and so it's a P2P economy, right? People to people now. So this is why Google has basically coined what they call micro moments, and so it's in these moments where I need to buy, I want to do, I want to go. It's very specific instances where context rules, right, not content, and they seek immediacy. It's all based on intent, and it's all driven by context or wrapped by context. So those reviews are just part of it, right? They're also looking for videos that sort of explain what an experience is like. They're looking for someone else's reaction who might have blogged or might have Facebooked or might have YouTubed, whatever it is. But they're making decisions based on the experiences of their peers.
Yeah. Talked about engagement and maybe metrics a little bit. People who watch this show, they are either entrepreneurs, they have a small business, or they're working for a bigger brand, trying to figure out how they should be measuring success, or at least, if they're not the CMO, how do we report success back to the top C-suite? What should we be measuring, and what are these key definitions of success now?
I can tell you what not to measure, which is the vanity metrics that are so popular, right? That everything's based on. And I know this is easier said than done, so hear me out. The likes or the tweets or the shares or the views or the impressions. These are things that I don't think are going to go away. But at the same time, things like Net Promoter Score, customer lifetime value. They're all important, right? Because they're in their own way, shape, or form. They are KPIs to something. So I like to take a step back. And I've also studied, amongst many things, influence, right? So what causes effect or what changes behavior? And believe it or not, most marketers do not answer the question of, well, what type of effect do I want my work to cause? Or what type of change in behavior do I want to inspire? Because we absolutely have, because of social and mobile and all of this technology today, the ability to drive that, right? So it's called activity-centered design, right? Someone's trying to do something, so how would you then steer it in a positive, mutually beneficial direction? So some of the best marketers in the world are scientists, right? Because they study ethnography, sociology, anthropology, psychology. These are all things that the best marketers absolutely understand, but everyday marketers just lean on the technology, like push out content, let's get views, but that doesn't necessarily drive desired behavior or effect, right? And so you have to think about, well, what are you trying to do? And then reverse engineer your metrics towards that, right? And so I think about, well, if I can get, for example, a video, if I can drive a certain amount of impressions that cause desired expressions, and those expressions would be not just conversations, but a click to something that leads to something, right? It's and sort of thinking about activity-centered design around, or to simplify it, what I call the art of engagement: actions, reactions, and transactions. So if you have someone's attention, what do you want to do with it? And I'll give you an example. I won't say the names, but they're real famous names. We did this experiment where we needed donations, right? And those donations were for a great cause. So there were two goals. One was to raise awareness of this cause amongst millennials, and the second was to have them donate, right? We did really great with awareness because everybody shared, our program, because it was highly shareable. It was designed to be shareable, right? So we had some 300,000 retweets in the matter of a few days, but we had very, very little donations. So we had to understand, how do you drive the type of outcome, the type of behavior, right? So we had measurements, right? So by all standards, vanity metrics, we looked fantastic, but it didn't do what we were actually.
It didn't translate.
It didn't translate. So we studied that. I won't give the story away, but we had to go back and redo and re-engineer our words, the content, and everything that we were doing to drive the desired effect, right? So it was basically along the lines of, it's funny, but like reverse psychology. Don't retweet, donate. It's basically the premise of that. We just had to say it a lot more eloquently, and of course it worked. Do you know that the reason why we were able to drive so many vanity metrics, aside from all of the celebrities that participated in it, was because everybody is, I say this with lovingly, of course, is an accidental narcissist, right? So everybody feels that they are the influencer. They're not the consumer. They're the influencer. They have an audience who happens to have an audience, who happens to have an audience of their own, right? And so anytime you say or do something, you think you're the center of attention. Like nobody's actually doing anything else on social media right now because you posted, they're waiting for you, and they're going to react, right? And so what we had learned is in the first round, the reason we had so many retweets is because everybody wanted to be part of that. They wanted to attach their name to this movement. They said, I'm not going to donate. I retweeted. That's got to be good for at least 100 donations.
Or my donation is lending my voice or my influence.
Exactly, exactly. And so you can do all of that without all day long, which was proof for us that vanity metrics they're not good enough. Impressions are not good enough. Views are not good enough. We need outcomes.
I want to ask you about BuzzFeed for 1 second, because this is a fascinating model. It's working for BuzzFeed, and I feel like almost every other publisher from every different genre, whether it's Outdoor Magazine or Vanity Fair or Mashable, they've all jumped on this BuzzFeed style bandwagon, just putting out, I read another publisher was putting out business content, and it was far from businessy, right? And I was thinking, I actually commented, I said, what is going on, guys? This is not business. What is happening here? Like, the quality of posts just continue to erode. It just seems like it's just fodder. Well, what's your take on that? And how successful can these other publishers who are not BuzzFeed, be and continue down this path?
Well, okay, so the question actually lines up to how I'm going to wrap your last question, which is, when you look at things differently with a fresh perspective, which is a human-centered perspective, right? Not you as the entrepreneur, not you as the marketer, not you as an executive within a big brand. When you see it from how people are living life, you actually start to see things differently, which then leads to what you should do next, which is, how would I talk differently, market differently, sell differently? How would I connect a better customer journey? How would I deliver a much more integrated customer experience that caters to these needs, because I now know what they are, right? And for me, it changed my entire career. If I had looked at other authors, which is what publishers are doing with BuzzFeed, I would have come up with something that was probably not as innovative. At best, it would have been iterative. And I think that's where we get confused with all of this technology in place. What's happening with, and I think I know who you're talking about, it's one of two. The
business is in their name.
then yes, I know exactly who you're talking about. But they're not the only ones. Everybody's looking at each other. It becomes incredibly insular, and I call it the remote control problem. Right? So you have all of this innovation across different brands with televisions, yet they all ship with the remote control. And that is the Achilles heel of a television experience, right? You could have the most beautiful flat screen, panel on your wall, and you've got a brick that has on average 70 buttons in it, because no one along the way decided to say, why don't we look outside of the television industry for innovation on the remote control? This is how we interact with devices today, yet we haven't been able to figure this out. So what's happening with said publication is that they're looking at the industry and they're trying to one-up it, or they're trying to be a fast follower, right? But that's actually not where BuzzFeed gets their inspiration. They're looking at the same way I looked at apps and attention spans and all of that, so that you can reverse engineer it to your platform. By the way, BuzzFeed's going to get into the television business, where they're going to use that same approach, and they're going to win in those spaces. And then all the other TV companies are going to try to do what the publishers are doing. And they're going to keep making remote controls until somebody like Steve Jobs said with the phone, the original iPhone team, Andy Grignon is a real good friend of mine, tells this story really wonderfully. Steve Jobs, with his original small group of the iPhone team, said, okay, come back to me with what the next steps are. They came back and they said, look, we've got this A list of people who are rock stars in the mobile world that we want to bring onto the team, drive the iPhone project. And Steve said, no, I don't want anybody on the iPhone that's ever worked on a phone, because then we're going to get a phone. And that's the same thing with what you're talking about. It's the same thing with me in the book. It's the same thing with all of the businesses that are out there. We keep looking at all of the wrong places to seek inspiration. This has probably never been a more important time for social science, I think, in business and innovation, right? Because it allows you to see things differently. Because if you look at iteration, innovation, and disruption, iteration is just kind of...
it's copycat.
Doing things maybe a little bit better, right? Innovation is doing new things that unlocks new value. And disruption is doing new things that make everything else obsolete, right? And that's what we saw with Netflix and Blockbuster, what we saw with Amazon and Borders, like Amazon and everything, like what we see with Uber and the taxi industry. This is exactly what's playing out, because people are looking at people and alternative sources for inspiration rather than the industry.
All right, we've been spending a little time with best-selling author Brian Solis talking about his new book, X. Brian, thanks for coming by.
Oh, Brian, thanks, man.